Hmm.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh, hello. Did you join us? I'm sorry. I was just doing some reading.
Nice.
Welcome to the Red Room Podcast, episode 193. I'm your host, Scott Ryan, and today we have a very special guest. Mr. Jeff Lemire is joining me. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Hi Scott. I'm good. It's good to see you. I think you should do the Red Room podcast from the Red Room though. I'm disappointed with your background.
Well, I mean, I guess that's true, except, I've got Twin Peaks all around me.
Yeah, I
I
know
mean, you
me.
can't see like Laura and the Fire Walk with Me poster is right there. Audrey Horne's right over there. Believe me, it's as much as my wife will allow me to have a red room.
I get it. Yeah.
There's a negotiation that's continuing with how much Cheryl Lee can be hanging on our walls.
Yeah, right. I get it. That's
I mean,
cool.
it really is right there's her homecoming picture. I swear it's out there, and she's not happy about it.
Well,
So you have hosted the Red Room before when you interviewed
yeah.
Josh Minton, and now returning as a guest. So this is very exciting.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of media for this. There's no doubt about it. But I'm going to guarantee that no one has opened with this question for you.
All right. Throw it at me.
Now, you, my friend, are 1 degree of separation from Barbra Streisand, and this excites me because James Brolin is the narrator of Sweet Tooth, and we got to get this out of the way. Have you met Barbra?
No, no, I have not. I've not met Barbra Streisand, James Brolin, or Robert Downey Jr. So there you go. I know it's so disappointing. It's okay if you don't want to interview me anymore.
Well, I just wondered, I'm a huge Barbra fan. I have been forever. And when I was watching it, the pilot, and we're going to get to all these things, we just got to start with what's important here.
Yeah.
And I was just like, boy, that sounds like, well, I call him Mr. Streisand, but let's call him James Brolin. But I'm like, it's not going to be James Brolin. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then at the end credits, I'm like, Jeff is 1 degree. He's my degree. But I guess it's 2, or maybe not even any degrees is what you're telling me.
My understanding is that the Downeys are neighbors with Barbra Streisand and Josh Brolin, and they talked him into doing the show. So that's the story I've heard. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I know, so disappointing.
Question number 2. I am nowhere near in the middle of the media storm you are in, but I just recently released a book about moonlighting, and I hired a publicist.
Yeah.
And she's done a great job, and I am going back to back
Yep.
on radio and things, and it's been a weird experience for me. I would like to start there with you. We'll get to the show, but just the media side of it, how has that been for you?
Oh, it's weird. It's like, I mean, I've been doing comics for like 15 years professionally. So when you release a new comic or something, you do like a small little press thing, usually where there's a few interviews with comics press, but there's nothing like this where it's like mainstream media, and it's like just a whole other level. But yeah, I mean, there were days where Netflix would line up these interviews, and you do like 6-hour blocks of 10-minute interviews back to back, and with people all over the world. They do like one morning you do like Latin America, one morning you do Europe, so it's like they have this global reach that it's very weird. And often, I mean, I'm sure you get it. You get like the same 3 or 4 questions. So you'll be doing an interview and you have like you develop answers that you give them all, because I mean, there's only so many things you can say that are
Right.
about these. So if you get the same like half dozen questions, you kind of have certain things you're trying to like communicate or say, and you start to say one, and then in your head you're like, did I just say this to this person already, or was that the last person?
For me, it's, did Bruce and Sybil really get along? Did Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd really get along? Yeah. I've been asked that question every time. And for you, what is the question that you would say you get asked the most?
Well, I mean, there's 3 big questions. The first one is, have you met Robert Downey Jr.? Which we've already covered that one. No, I have not. The
I didn't even care. For me, it was
yeah,
Barbara, but whatever.
I like that. The other one I get every time is that the show is a lot lighter in tone than the comic, or like more family friendly than the comic. And how are you with that? Is that something you're okay with? And then yeah, I think those are the two actually that I get every
Those are the
time.
big ones.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But it is hard, isn't it, to answer the same question? Like you wouldn't think it would be hard, but it actually
It's
is.
not hard. Sometimes it's interesting, like when you start doing the interviews, you think one way about things, but some of the questions can actually sort of educate you. Like you almost like you learn more about your show or whatever by the questions you get, and you get better at answering the questions. Like it makes you form opinions, I guess, and but I think the harder part, it's not hard, but the thing is, you can't, like, there's only one truth. You can only answer a question
Right.
truthfully. So it feels like after a while you're just saying the same thing over and over to people, and it seems like disingenuous or something, but it's not. It's just like, well, that's just the true answer. But so you know what I mean. But I mean, it's a weird thing. It's not my favorite part of making things, is doing interviews to begin with. So so doing them on that scale was really weird. But
What's the biggest one you had?
biggest interview.
Yeah, like I'm so old that the first name that came to me was Joan London. I mean, I was gonna say Joan London, like how old am I? But
Yeah,
I mean,
probably
did
the same.
Jimmy Fallon or Stephen Colbert, like did you have
No,
anyone
I didn't
really
get any of
big? I mean,
those. I didn't get any of those. They mentioned me on Seth Meyers. That was kind of cool, but I wasn't. They were just interviewing Will Forte on that one. No, I mean I did, like Entertainment Weekly and things like that. So
oh, that's
that are kind of
big.
like big mainstream media outlets for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I wasn't on any sort of. This is the biggest show I'm on, Scott. This is it right
Well,
now.
you're not gonna top the Red Room.
That's right. You
I mean,
can't.
that'd be ridiculous. But for me, I like the first thing I say to be funny. So what I normally do on a radio station, if I'm live, I listen to what's right before me,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and then I have a joke keyed keyed up,
So, yeah,
ready
you're
to go.
better.
And what I found is they don't like it.
Oh really?
That I throw them because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
so like they have what they were gonna do.
yeah.
And they want to know, did Bruce and Sybil have sex? That's really the only thing why I'm on there. And so many times they just ignore me. They don't even respond to what I just said. And I love that. Like I grew up on Letterman. He's sort of my hero. So
Yeah.
I want to disrupt what is going on. And but see, for you,
You were different.
you
I just
can't
want to
do
get it
it.
over with as quickly as possible. So I do not disrupt anything.
Well, but also, see, I've never been in that situation because you wouldn't have anything coming in. That's actually hard. Your way is harder. It's just I assume they're all Zoom and they're just dropping
Yeah,
in.
it's all Zoom now, and they're just like they just link them in one after another. Yeah, it's kind of strange.
Well, we'll see. With my next book about a TV show that no one watches, we'll see if I get that. So here's my first of all, I loved Sweet Tooth, and for those who are listening, we're not going to spoil anything for a while. I'll get right now. We're going to talk very high level, and then if we get into details, we'll give you a
Sure.
spoiler alert. When I loved it, I absolutely loved it from start to finish. I thought it was
That's good.
great.
Yeah, I
um
like it too. Yeah,
Mike, I get fatherhood from this.
yeah.
That's really what I get. And I'm curious, when you go all the way back to writing the comics, what was the theme that sparked it? Because my guess, it seemed like it was
It's that.
fatherhood.
So I mean, I'll take you back. This would have been 2008 that I started working on this book. Somewhere in 2008. So and in my life at that point, my wife and I had been married for a number of years, but we decided we wanted to have children, or a child. So she was pregnant right around the same time I was working. I came up with this idea. So yes, fatherhood was it. It was like I kind of developed the story in the world while she was pregnant, and then started drawing the comic and actually executing it right after our son was born. So Gus, the
Hmm.
character, is named after my son, who is Gus. And and this a story but that takes place in a pandemic, obviously, that is like the catalyst for this bizarre world that Sweet Tooth is. And now my son Gus is pretty much the same age as the character was, and we just are going through an actual pandemic. So that's a weird thing.
So
But
we
to
have
go
you
back
to
to your
blame. All this time I've been blaming a bat, and it's your fault.
it's Dear Boys. It's always a Dear Boy. uh Yeah, so yeah, fatherhood is a big one. It was like kind of like me being terrified of becoming a parent and not being able to protect him, or like, and and the world around us has grown so scary in that last decade since I did the book, and the thought of like a child entering that world and having to navigate it, and maybe without me to protect him, all these things were baked right into Sweet Tooth, so that you're definitely picking up the right theme. Yeah.
Have you read The World According to Garp?
No, I haven't. I saw the film years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, I haven't read.
Um, I really, it's, obviously they're nothing alike, because that's the thing I loved about Sweet Tooth. I remember when the pilot was over, my wife and I both said, like, well, we've never seen that before.
Yeah,
And that's
right.
rare until that's like my first step into a show. Like, I'm so
Yeah,
sick of seeing the
I know.
same
So
thing over and over again. And for those
yeah,
of you who haven't tried Sweet Tooth yet, I guarantee you will not watch this and go, oh my God, I saw this 4 times on CBS. But it reminded me of Garp, where John Irving also, he wrote that in fear of being a father. And
oh,
it's
is that
sort
right?
of, I mean, they're not the same at all, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
themes are there. But I wouldn't have guessed that she was pregnant when you came up, because what I loved about the show, because I'm a dad and I have 4 kids,
Yeah.
and my go-to comedy is to say that I hate them, because it really upsets people. You're not, you're only supposed to say you love your children and they're perfect, and every day that I've had them is a blessing. And that
Yeah.
has not been my experience, that
Yeah.
every day was a blessing. And
Cool.
that's what I really got from Sweet Tooth. He's a pain in the ass. That kid is a pain in the ass, like a real kid.
Yeah,
And
he's a
and so how did you, that's interesting to me that she was pregnant. I mean,
Mhm.
how did you know that kids are lovable and the worst thing that ever happened to you at the same time?
Because I was a kid. Yeah, so you draw on that. It's funny. I think it's actually there's a lot of truth in that answer, because I feel like before we had our son, all my books were kind of I've always had children protagonists in a lot of my stories. For whatever reason, I love writing that point of view, and I enjoy it. But before our son, a lot of my books were probably like me looking back on my own childhood, and then all of a sudden now they became about parent fatherhood after that. But so yeah, I think it just comes from my own experience of being a kid, and being around my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had a young child at the time that we helped take care of a lot and babysit. So you're around kids and you kind of get what it's like a little bit to a certain degree, but you're
But
not really prepared
television,
for.
yeah,
Yeah,
television doesn't tell you that. Like, one of the things that I think, on the train, when he's lost dog,
yeah,
and then he goes and looks for it.
yeah,
And someone who doesn't have kids could watch that and go, like, oh, that was so dumb. Why would he go get the dog?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you don't know what a kid is like. That is exactly what a kid doesn't care that it's the end of the world and all these things. They want their
yeah,
stuffed animal.
yeah.
They're going to go get their stuffed animal.
And you never realize that dog character is brilliant. He's not in the comic, but he's in the show. And until you have a kid who's really attached to like a stuffed animal that they had when they were a baby, or a blanket or something, and you see that real bond that they have, you don't really get it. It's like a visceral, like it's like panic time if you lose that. So, yeah.
Yeah, my kids, it was the Teletubbies. Dear Lord, they each had a Teletubby, and carrying the stupid things around, and you're like, could there be something that's less important than this? But so that leads me into my other thing that I'm so curious about is what was changed. You were in the writer's room, but none of the episodes are scripted by you.
Yeah.
So what tell me what your role was, and then I want you to break down like how these changes happened and how that was for you. But
Yeah.
like, what was your role in this process?
Yeah. So it was interesting, and it changed a lot. It was, I mean, obviously I created the comic and I own the comic. So, but Warner Brothers DC published it, and they kind of they control it, but I own it, if that makes sense. So I didn't really have a lot of say in who did the show or how they were going to do the show. Those were all decisions made without me. I got really lucky because the guy who came on as the showrunner and the head writer and director, Jim Mickle, is awesome, and he did a great job, which it could have gone anyway.
Sure.
So but Jim didn't have an obligation to really include me in this, but he did, which was amazing because I think he just valued my perspective and he respected the book. Obviously, he loved the book, which is why he wanted to do the show. So really early on, Jim would call me and kind of run things by me and kind of include me in that stuff, and get my opinion on things. And then they shot the pilot sort of by itself first, not knowing if it would get picked up as a full series, right? So I got to go on set for that in New Zealand, and that was incredible experience. We can talk more about that later if you want, but
Yeah.
and that was awesome. And then like but then the world changed. The pandemic hit, so like I couldn't be part of the writers' room. I couldn't go back to New Zealand for the rest of the series shoot. So really, the only contact I had was with Jim kind of filling me in on what they were doing and me giving some feedback when I could. So my role in this first season was pretty limited, but it was okay with me because every time Jim and I talked, I loved what he was doing. I mean, I think the only time you'd kind of get panicked and try to get more involved as if they were doing something you didn't like, and you would try to steer it in a different back to what you did, but I never had that issue with Jim. He was very respectful of the book, and even though some things changed dramatically, the heart of Sweet Tooth is still very much the heart what I did in the comics. So I was open to those changes, and the truth was I'm writing a different TV show of my own right now, or during that time as well. One of my other shows or one of my other books I'm adapting, and there was just no way for me to be heavily involved in both. It's just so time consuming.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense to me because I remember that in some time when we were emailing, you were saying you were in the writer's room.
Yes,
So I
that's
didn't
for
realize that's
County.
for the other
Yeah.
one. Do you want to say
Yes.
which one that is,
Yeah,
or you
yeah.
don't?
So Essex County is the book I did before Sweet Tooth, and I'm adapting that myself right now. I'm still working on it. So that's like a very intensive process. So I couldn't do that for two shows. So I was happy to let Jim take over and do something cool, and then just sort of enjoy the ride, on this one, which was great. Yeah.
So I do want to hear about New Zealand, but before we get there, tell me something that they added that you hated. You were like, nope, you went home and you told your wife, I'm not allowed to say anything. This is stupid. It made you angry. But then now that it's done, you're like, you know what? Jim
Okay.
knows more than me.
So this character of Bobby, this gopher boy, who I love, like my version of Bobby in the comics is very different. He's a little creepier and so I love Bobby. But when I saw the footage come back of the puppet version of Bobby, when I saw it, you could still see the puppeteers, like they hadn't CGI'd them out yet,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, this is so bad, like this is gonna knock me over. And I'm telling my wife, like, it's so cheesy, like it's really stupid, right? And then you see the show when it's all like done well, and people love this character. I'm like, it actually works. It's really good. But I think they were a little worried too, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
They pulled it off. So that was one I was like, this is gonna kill the show. Like this is gonna be terrible. Until I saw the final show, and it was.
Well, when I saw it, I mean, to me, I said, "Oh, this is their Baby Yoda. They're going for the Baby Yoda character of Sweet Tooth." So you mentioned, well, let's talk about going to New Zealand, because the other thing that I want from a TV show is, one, I definitely want something I haven't seen before. It's just really hard for me to watch over. And this show couldn't possibly check the box more. But I also want quality filmmaking.
Yeah.
and we obviously know where we get that sensibility from. But I mean, the directing and more so the lighting in this
Yeah.
show is incredible. So,
Yeah.
what did you learn about that being on the set and watching them create that world that's
Yeah.
beautiful?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, when I did the book, this, like I said, that was over a decade ago that I did the book, and I was coming from it, like coming at it from a place of like loving dystopian fiction and post-apocalyptic stuff when I was a kid, and a lot of post-apocalyptic comics, and Stephen King's The Stand and all this stuff that we all kind of grew up on. So I was kind of approaching it visually from that point of view. And it also suited my sort of sparse minimalistic drawing style of a very flat landscape, very sparsely populated, and they went a really different route with the show. The show's they're in this New Zealand landscape that is incredibly lush and full and green, and it's almost like a fairy tale. Um, so that was different. That change is a big change, but I kind of like it for a lot of reasons. But I think a big one is that since I did the book, there's been a lot of post-apocalyptic TV shows that have come on, like you're saying, and I feel like we've seen that landscape a lot on screen, that sort of bleak dystopian kind of place
Mhm.
that in the comic. So I feel like it wouldn't have been new if they'd done that again for Sweet Tooth. Um, so when I got to New Zealand, I'd never been there before. I don't know if you have, but
No.
it is like paradise on earth. This place it's unreal. Like it's just the most beautiful place, and it's just everywhere you look, there are mountains and trees, and it's gorgeous. So to see the world change, but kind of come to life through that lens was really cool. And yeah, Jim Mickle, the cinematographer, and Aaron Morton's the cinematographer. Jim was the director, and I could tell right away that it was going to look great because um, the stuff they were doing on the soundstage looked incredible when I was there, and then this any outdoor stuff was just, you had this built-in beauty, like it was just
Yeah.
incredible, right? But you still don't really know what it's going to look like until you see the final, like color corrected CGI, whatever they do version of it. But yeah, I knew it was going to look really beautiful, and I knew that Jim was a great director. I'd seen Happen Leonard, which was a show he had done that was really great, and a couple of his films as well. So I had faith that it was going to look beautiful for sure.
And it really does. I mean, it knocked my socks off continuously as far as shots that he set up. I mean, you could really tell it wasn't just point and shoot. I mean, they
Yeah.
really were
Oh
setting
no.
up and you felt it. And to me, especially at that level, I want it to be good as well. Look good
Yeah.
and be good.
I think Jim comes from features too, so he comes from shooting films, and like much like David Lynch, like who our main guy, So I think he's approaching these things not as the way that they would traditionally approach shooting a show, but shooting it like a film, really, and you can see that, especially he directed the pilot, and I think it's just incredibly gorgeous, and
Yeah.
he did make a couple other episodes, and yeah, I mean, yeah, it really is cinematic. It's not your typical broadcast television stuff that we're kind of used to seeing a million times.
Yeah, definitely. Will Forte was kind of a surprising choice,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's kind of
yeah.
surprising that but he is great, and
Yeah.
I would almost say he's a little too good because you really miss him if he's
Yeah,
not in an episode.
yeah, I know.
Um,
Yeah, so they were doing all his stuff when I was there. I got to see all his stuff, and he really humanized that character of Father. Like in my version of Father, he's like a much sterner, kind of cold, religious, kind of fanatical character, and they changed that. They made him really human and really kind, and even when I was on set for the pilot shoot, we would go out for dinner, and Will was there, and we were all like, we have to find ways to bring Father back later because it's too good, so then and spoilers, they do bring it back a couple times, so
right.
yeah, you're right. He's, when he comes back, especially in that that sort of bottle episode near the end where you see some of the origin story with him and Birdie. I think
That was
like
my favorite episode.
yeah, it's my favorite.
I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
I love. Oh, I was gonna have IMDb up here because I knew I was gonna mess names. Tommy. I love Tommy.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great character. But there was something about father, and it could be that I am a dad. I suppose maybe some of that's coming through, but I don't know. That it's the second to last episode, right?
Yeah,
Is the bottle episode?
Yeah.
I thought it was the strongest episode
so
in the
Yeah.
whole series.
It's my favorite one. Yeah.
Is that in your comic, or is that something that
Yeah,
they
it
brought
is,
in?
but it's much later in the series. It's near. I saved it till near the end of the series to see some of that stuff, and they did change it quite a bit. But yeah, there is that bottle where you see the origin and you see father working in the lab and stuff like that. But yeah, that comes. I mean, the comic went for 4 years, so it was like 40 issues, and it comes somewhere in the 30s, I think. So
Wow.
But they front loaded that in a good way, I think, because there's still a lot of mystery left. That it's not like they spoiled everything, you know. And I think it really brings the whole season together.
I think you had to have it. I really do, because the human aspect of which is why all those stories work. You know what I mean? Like in the end, that's why comics work, because it always comes back to the human side, not the supernatural side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that episode, just the way the chemistry he has with Birdie, and it's not. There's scenes at the bar are not how you think they're going to play out. I mean, it was really good. That's my tax lady, by the way. My tax lady is calling me right now. I don't want to get that at this point.
You don't want to get
You know what I mean? There's no way there's no way that's a good thing. They're just calling because they found a couple 100,000 they didn't know about. Excuse me for that. But I mean, to me, that episode was the strongest, and it makes you want to learn more and see more, and that's the best thing about television.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I love. Well, we know that we both love Twin Peaks, but I also I'm a big Lost fan as well, you know, and I think that when Lost was at its best, it was so character driven, like the supernatural stuff, the mystery, the weird, that was all cool, but it was the characters we loved. And when they would often do stuff like that, where you'd be watching a season, all of a sudden it would just be this bottle where you get this big chunk of information, but also more mysteries within those bottles, you know. And it reminded me a bit of the best of Lost, that episode.
What's funny, I actually have Lost written down here. If I was going to compare this show to any other show, it would be Lost, especially in the first 3 episodes where you get introduced to somebody new. And it really was like how Lost is, where, you know, you're like, oh, you're kind of getting this character and you know they're going to intertwine at some point.
Right. Yeah.
And I was going to ask if Lost when you talked to Jim, was he
Actually, I don't think I've ever talked to him. I don't think he and I ever mentioned Lost at any point. I know I mean, when I did the show, or when I did the comic, I guess Lost was still kind of in its peak then, you know, so I'm sure it was.
Yeah, it was.
And I was a huge fan, so I'm sure it baked itself into the comic, and then that stuff must have worked itself into the show as well. But I don't know that Jim and I ever actually mentioned it as a touchstone, but it did really remind me, that episode, in a great way, of when Lost was really firing, you know.
And do you like the end of Lost as a quick side thing?
I know it's so divisive, but I love it. Yeah.
I know, me too. I don't know why.
I never really get what the problem was, but yeah, I
how else was it gonna end?
Super emotional and character driven, and yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never got, and I'm the same with Battlestar Galactica. I love the last episode of Battlestar.
Did people not like that one? Because I thought.
Yeah, I've heard people say they don't like it. I'm like, what more? I think people don't like endings.
I think the problem is with fandom in general is that you can't please them. So it's like, which I've learned from doing comics, you know, try writing the X-Men sometime and then you'll learn you can never please anybody. But I feel like, especially the more you build up anticipation for an ending and people get all invested in it, you can't please them all. You know, Game of Thrones had that problem. Lost, Battlestar Galactica. Anytime you have these really big shows that kind of capture popular, you know, the popular sort of pop cultural consciousness and people get really invested. I find that often people hate the endings, and then maybe like 5-10 years later they start to like re-examine them and like appreciate them because the anticipation is gone or whatever, and they can just actually see what they were. But yeah, I just see like fandom, it's, you can try to do an ending where you please all different aspects of fandom and you fail and it'll be terrible, or you can just choose a lane and do it really well, which I think those shows did, you know.
Yeah, as to me, especially Battlestar's ending. Let's talk about the pandemic and how that affected the series.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting to me that you did this way before, but there's no way to watch this show and not consider it. And to me, the best scene of the series for that, and you know, it reminds me, I'll tell you what it reminds me of, and then I'll tell you what scene it is, and we'll see if you can get there. But my favorite scene in The Return will always be when the Mitchum brothers say, you know, people are stressed out here, and they're hiding while the accountant is shooting the machine gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that was the scene between the two people fighting outside the hospital.
Yeah.
Because that showed how quickly we're just not behaving like a community.
Yeah.
And I loved that scene. And, you know, are those things because of the pandemic? Do you think that they're there?
Well,
and
I kind of know exactly what was written and done before and after. So, I mean, the pilot obviously was done well before. Like that was, they shot that. Time has bled together
for all of us.
So when did the pandemic start? 2020, right? The early 2020.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, the pilot was, I think, spring 2019. We shot the pilot. So that obviously pandemic had nothing to do with that. And the comic was written a decade ago. So, but then I think they had gotten greenlit as a series and had been in a writer's room for a number of weeks, and they'd written the first 4 episodes before COVID actually happened. So anything up to like episode 4, that was all pre-pandemics. But I think the scene you're talking about was later in the series. That's definitely one you can see like a little commentary on what was actually happening, you know. But yeah, I mean, a good chunk of the series, at least half of it, was pretty much, and they had written the first 4, but they had plotted the whole series at that point before COVID. So there a few details worked their way in, but a lot of it was just already written, you know. And I think the only things that really changed, the train episode, that was supposed to be a passenger train, not a cargo train, but it just would have involved so many more extras on set that it was just a practical pandemic thing. Like, it's not as safe. Let's strip that back. You know, little things like that. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just they had been researching all this stuff, what would happen if a pandemic hit, and writing it that way, and then seeing it all kind of, the things they had written actually happening, you know, like week by week. So it's very surreal. So I don't think a ton of the show was really influenced a lot by what was going on, you know, to be honest. There might have been little scenes near the end like that, but yeah.
Well, it's just sad how much it does reflect how people react to it. And it probably makes it easier for people to not pick the series apart, because you'd be like, well, we wouldn't behave that way. You know what? If there was a pandemic, we'd all wear masks and never have to be told twice, you know?
Yeah, right.
And you'd have all that stuff. So is there going to be a season 2?
I can't tell you that. Okay. I wish I could. I really don't know. That's why I can tell you. Yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, by all accounts, it's done really well globally and everything. So, you know, everyone's really optimistic, but whatever metrics and all that stuff that Netflix uses, they're still calculating. I don't know. I haven't heard any official word yet. I mean, I hope so. I mean, knowing where the comic goes and where Jim wants to go, and I think it would be great for him to be able to finish the story the way I got to finish it, for sure.
And how long would, if, you know, all things were considered, you would want it to go 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 2? What would you want story-wise?
In the discussions we've had, it kind of feels like 3 to 4, you know, like I don't think 2 is enough to do the whole thing. So yeah, I think it would be a 3 or 4 season thing would be ideal, right? I don't think you could go any longer than that, especially with the kids, because they would age so fast. So that would be weird. I didn't have to worry about that when I'm drawing the book. The characters don't age, but
Right.
Christian, who plays Gus in particular, he was 8 when they shot the pilot, and then you could see a slight jump between the pilot and the rest of the season.
I didn't notice.
Oh, that's
So
good.
I didn't tell. I couldn't
But
tell.
now he's like what, 10, so he's gonna start growing fast. So
Yeah, they better get that kid back to New Zealand. Come on,
I
get
know.
him on a plane and let's get this done.
So,
Um, so let's talk about cliffhangers because I'm curious, where are we with cliffhangers right now with Netflix? Because there were many times that I thought an episode was coming up to be a cliffhanger, and
yeah.
you would sort of have the cliffhanger and then one more scene, and even kind of the ending. Um, so I'm gonna now, if you have not seen Sweet Tooth,
Yeah.
what's your problem? Go binge the thing like you like to do, and then come back and listen because I'm about to spoil something that happens towards the end. But when Tommy's shot,
Yeah.
like that could be a cliffhanger, but
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
people don't like them anymore. So
Really?
what can you
Yeah.
tell me? Because I mean, like Netflix, not humans, but I feel like all their shows, they really want it to be more of like an emotional cliffhanger so they can say 6 months later or something and have, fire the people that they don't want to bring back or whatever. I mean, that's my TV watcher idea. Where do you
Yeah.
think we are with cliffhangers right
I
now?
think it's changed because of the whole binge thing, right? Whereas like a cliffhanger traditionally would be something that would be such a hook or such a hanging thread that you would have to come back a week later and tune in. Whereas now you just click, or you let it run right into the next episode. So I don't think it's as important to have those as so much as to hook them with characters and emotion to keep them watching. That's my theory on it. So I feel
Mm.
like maybe that's part of it. I think it's just changed the way that you tell stories a little bit because of that.
How do
Probably.
you feel about them in your work? Do you
I
want to
always
end?
but I'm still on a monthly comic thing where I have to get them back the next month. So, and it's just a great way to build an issue or an episode towards something like that. I still really love them. Yeah. I think they're great. Yeah, I mean, with Sweet Tooth, I think they're like 3 cliffhangers, and it kind of keeps going, right? Like you said, there's like Jeopard being shot, and then that goes to something else. And um, yeah, I mean, I like them, but I think I like what they did too, because it almost, Jeopard being shot was one thing, but you kind of know he's not going to die. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, that's true too, right?
And where they end with that character, I think is even a better cliffhanger, because
Mhm.
his story dovetails with Amy's, and then you just can't wait to see those two together trying to save the kids, right? I feel like that's a better setup for season 2 than just him lying there shot. So, but I mean, I like them.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I am developing a TV show right now. And, supposedly they're going to pitch it to Netflix. I'm in meetings with a guy who knows how to write these things and pitch things. And then we got it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm getting eaten alive. And sometimes I feel like they think I'm a nut, like an absolute nut. When I say, we started off I said, look, there is nobody addicted to alcohol. There's no drug addict. Nobody beats their wife. Like, this is a human story. We're not going to do that. Everyone is, drunk or on drugs.
Okay. Yeah.
And you could just see them kind of look at me like, well, how are we going to sell it and things? And it's been just such a weird experience. What can you tell me? What advice do you want to give me to get me through this? Now, I don't have any power whatsoever in this, but from your side, this is what I want from you. Lay it on me. Give me some advice.
My advice is to just expect that it's never going to happen,
Oh
because
yeah, I'm there.
yeah, it's I've done a lot of books, and I've had, like, I think right now I have probably 10 things that are optioned in development at various stages, right? And you could sit around waiting for things to happen with those, and building anticipation, and it takes forever to get these things made. Like Essex County, we've been working on that really hard for 5.5 years now, and we still haven't, you know what I mean? And Sweet Tooth was a good 4 years of development, and Sweet Tooth actually happened. Most times you do all that work and it doesn't actually happen. So,
Right.
my advice to you is to not put any hopes and dreams into Hollywood, because you'll never be satisfied, and the chances of something getting made is so slim. I think for me, the best thing about what I'm doing is that what I really love to do is make comics, and that's where all my energy and emotion and power and passion goes, and that's something I can control. Unlike film and television, I can write something and draw it, and a few months later it's published, right? And so I just focus on that stuff, and the TV and movie stuff for me is like this extra little thing that's happening off to the side. And when I need to work on something for it, I do. And then I don't think about it at all. And if something happens, great. And if not, I haven't lost anything, So my advice for you to be focused on your writing and do
And
that.
I
And then if
definitely
other
am.
stuff happens, it's like, oh, that's cool. Let's do that now. But if it doesn't, you haven't lost anything, you haven't invested.
Yeah. And, you don't have to give me advice to be a pessimist. That's the one thing that I've got down. But it has been a really interesting experience to be in meetings and pitch an idea and just watch them not be able to think about it. And I've actually said, like, look, I'm a David Lynch fan. I'm not interested in giving answers. And you just wonder how he has ever been able to push something out.
But
Now
no one's been able to do that like him, except him, for some, like that
Right.
just doesn't happen, where you have that kind of cachet and power where they let you have that freedom. Because everyone always wants the dumbest version of what you're pitching, and you have to almost trick them into doing something that's not that. Hollywood, they don't have a lot of imagination, so it's like they want everything answered neatly. They want it's they don't want the David Lynch version of things.
Right. It's
how do you actually get something like that made? I have no idea. No.
What have you learned going through this that now you look back at what Mark Frost and David Lynch did? How do you view Twin Peaks now from coming through this machine?
Even more just utter respect. I mean, I've always respected it, but I don't know how those guys got that made the way they got it made and had the freedom that they had, because that just doesn't exist. I guess Lynch just has this mystique around him that he can do these things, but he's kind of a one of a kind human being, I mean, that show, we could get into that. You could do a whole podcast about that show.
No. Some have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just total bafflement that something like that actually got made, first of all, and that they had the freedom to do it, because that doesn't happen ever, I don't think.
No, I mean, it has been really fascinating to just watch people not even to understand like why people go to television, which I certainly do not have experience. Of course, I don't have experience in doing this, which is why I'm working with someone else.
Yeah.
But I do have experience consuming television, and I have, I feel like I have enough credit to say, look, I kind of know what I'm talking about, what people like. But it's been an interesting experience. But I'm with you. It's probably
and I think that those worlds, like the whole film, TV world and everything, it's just, if anything, it's just getting more corporate all the time, so it's even harder to do really creative things within it, I think. That's why I don't know, like, I mean, Sweet Tooth is, I'm so lucky that, I mean, anyone who's a writer or an artist or whatever, first of all, you're lucky if something actually gets made, because it rarely ever happens. But then for it to actually be good, it's like it's like getting struck by lightning twice. It doesn't. So I'm super lucky with Sweet Tooth that it's actually good and I like it, because it doesn't happen often. It could have been terrible.
Well, and I got to be honest with you, I was a little nervous about it, because I thought, well, I know for you, but I mean, I was like, oh, I can't tell Jeff I like this if I don't. I'm like, what am I going to do? I make everything about me. I'm not worried about you. And then I honestly got sucked up into it because I'm not a superhero type person. That's not
Yeah,
what I go to, but I would not say this is superhero. And I
no,
don't think Gideon Falls is either,
no, none of my stuff
um,
anymore really is. Yeah,
which
I mean,
I like. What about Gideon
yeah,
Falls? Are you developing that? Because that one's my favorite one.
yeah, that one is being developed. Yes, not by me. Again,
Mhm.
someone else working on that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, that's my most Twin Peaksian book for
Yeah.
sure. That's my
Yeah.
love of Twin Peaks. So yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah. I
like that one
mean,
quite a bit.
the superhero stuff is really it's I'm so sick of it. I mean, there's just so much of it out there now. Like when I was a kid, when you read comics and superhero stuff, it was geeky, like truly geeky, and no one did it, and it wasn't cool. And I feel like it's kind of been taken away from us and turned into like mass media now, and I just don't have any interest in writing it anymore or watching it really. So the stuff that I do, even way back to Sweet Tooth, I was, just like you were saying, you wanted to see TV shows you haven't seen before. I wanted to see comics I hadn't seen, and that's why I made stuff like Sweet Tooth and things that weren't your typical superhero things. So I think it is cool that they're starting to make some of these kind of comic adaptations now, and not just another, Iron Man or whatever.
Right. But we love Iron Man for
I
Robert
love
Downey
Iron
Jr.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to say
That
anything
was a
bad
bad
about Robert
example.
Downey.
It was very bad.
So, you are so prolific. It is crazy to me. You're always have a new comic out, a new idea. I kind of want to understand in a simplistic way how you approach something. Do you start with the story? You start with the image? It starts with the drawing. So let's say, just for fun, you and I are going to develop a comic together, and
Yeah.
it's going to be Broadway Boy.
Okay.
Okay, so we're starting with
I'm
Broadway
already
Boy.
in. I just sold it to a publisher. Let's keep going.
And so it is your first thing you're going to draw Broadway Boy, or why is he broad? Did they not let him sing in elementary school? I mean, where are we starting if we're
Yeah, well,
creating
I mean, I don't
Broadway Boy?
start with Broadway Boy. I start with, um, I think, well, I mean, it's always kind of different too for each project. They come from different places, so it's hard to give one answer. But I think in general, I just get little like, I don't even know. They're not even ideas yet. There's sometimes it can just be like an image or a word that for some reason strikes me a certain way, and I think of you almost get a mood or a tone more than an idea. And then you get a few of those and put them together, and then over time they start to build into something, and then you come up with Broadway Boys. So it's just like a lot of little things that you start to like collect and think about, and then you get another little thing that you're like, oh, if I put that with that, it starts to get an idea. That's not a great answer, I know, but it's like,
It was the
um,
truthful answer. That's why it's not
yeah,
a
it's
great
just like
answer.
a bunch of little things that usually kind of snowball together until it becomes an actual story or a character or whatever. And it can be anything. Like I said, it can be a word that just strikes you funny one day, and it makes you think of like something. And sometimes it can be a drawing. Like I'll be randomly drawing stuff in a sketchbook, and a character will appear, or an image will appear there that is begging for a story to explain it, and you start to answer the questions. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of different for each book, so it's hard to really say where they all come from.
So
It's usually,
it's not just straight visual or straight plot from in. It's
it's
a
more
different
emotional,
plan.
usually an emotion or a mood that you want to try to get, and then you'll think of things that kind of fit that, and that's where you kind of build a little story out of that, or a couple characters, and yeah. And then the whole thing is
Mhm.
just about trying to, I mean, Lynch talks about this a lot. This thing, he kind of following his intuition, of something, a feeling, and something feels right or it doesn't. He does that, and but it's true, because you'll get this idea, and it feels a certain way to you before you put it down on paper, before you articulate it. You have this little feeling of what that idea feels like, and every decision you make, it's like, does it still feel like that, or does it start to not feel like that anymore? So it's like this, you're trying to keep that feeling, that original little spark for an idea or a world or a character. And sometimes you can feel yourself veer off and go down a path that doesn't feel like the thing anymore that you were working on. And that's when you have to kind of pull it back, or get rid of that part. So it's kind of like sculpting in a way, of adding things to it that feel right and pulling away the things that don't. um yeah, I don't know
How
if that
many
makes.
things do you not finish? So you get that feeling
Well, you know what
and
happens
you
a lot.
add things. Do
Yeah,
you?
I'll have things all the time that I start like that. I'm like, this could be something, and I'll start writing down things, and then it's like stops. I'm like, yeah, it just doesn't feel like anything, and I just stop. And then like 10 years later, I'll be working on something else that doesn't feel right, but I'll remember that thing from back then and I'll put them together, and it becomes Gideon Falls, because that's exactly how that worked. Like I had this, Gideon Falls was like this thing that I worked on for years when I first started trying to make comics, and I just couldn't get it to work, and I kept starting and stopping, and I finally just abandoned it and went on to other things. And then I was working on this totally different idea a couple of years ago about this barn, this like demonic barn and this priest and stuff. And it was like okay, but it wasn't special. Like it felt like too much like a pastiche of like Twin Peaks or the X-Files or something, where it was like one dimensional, just like a supernatural rural story, which was cool but not special. And then I remembered this character from 10 years earlier who collected garbage and thought something was happening in the city's garbage system. And I was like, well, what if he's looking for pieces of this barn? And then I was like, okay, that's like this other layer. And it opened these doors, and it became about these two different worlds and these two different men who were like on a path. And it became more layered and interesting and sparked for me, So you never throw away ideas, even the dumb ones, because when you put the dumb ones with something good, they can they can unlock more, sometimes. And then there's other things I'll write down and forget I ever wrote them down probably. And so, but yeah, I'm always just sort of writing down like little inklings of ideas and stuff.
Also, the other thing that I think is interesting to talk with someone who's prolific is about finishing.
Yeah.
I like to finish things, which is why my stuff gets done.
Yeah, exactly.
I set a date, and I never say that book is the best book. That was the best book I could make by that date.
That's right.
How do
You do
you
the best
work
you
with
can do every day,
deadlines?
and that's all you can do. Yeah, it's the same with me. I learned early on, again, working on that early project that I was talking about when I first was trying to make comics. I would work on it for a few months, and I was still developing then because I was young and still figuring out how to draw and everything. And so I'd work for a few months, and then my drawing style and stuff would change or improve so much that I'd look back at the first part of it and would be like, oh, I can't publish that. It has to be this good. So I'd start over. And I literally did that like 4 times, where I kept starting over and over and not finishing anything. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. You have to just finish something and put it out into the world and make the next thing better. You can't, there's never the perfect version of your idea ever. Like, there's always flaws, always things you're going to be embarrassed by when you look back at it that you wish you could have done differently and better. But if you get caught up in that stuff too much, you never actually put anything out into the world. So at some point, it's like I'm going to do the best I can every day at this, and then move on to the next page, the next story. And because of that, I've been able to be prolific, because I'm not precious, and you have to finish things. You have to put them out. And if there are things that bug you about it, that's what you take to your next project, and you
Right?
improve those on the next project. Those are the things you work on. And that's how you
Yeah.
get,
I always say that I don't think words are precious. And especially like working with the Blue Rose, we have 24 pages or whatever it is. And that article has to stop on that page for the next one to start. And there will be times I will go in and I'm like, how am I short? Oh, I love that thing. Like, look, that was an interesting theory that no one ever said before. Bloop,
Yep.
delete. Because otherwise you are frozen
Yeah. I think
and
one
you
good
do
thing about
nothing.
work, one of the good things about sort of the middle part of my career was I did a lot of work for Marvel and DC Comics, where it was, it's like you're in a factory, like pumping out 20 pages a month of Wolverine or whatever. And then you also have to write X-Men, Moon Knight, and whatever this month. And so you don't have time. You literally do not have time to overthink things or be precious. You need to get those pages done. You need to move on to the next issue. And that's good training for not being precious, and just, you do the best you can as you're working on it. You get your ideas out, and then you don't have a choice. You move on to the next issue or the next whatever. And I think that's really good training, because you can start to like paralyze yourself by trying to reach some sort of perfection that doesn't exist. And usually the flaws in your work are sometimes the most interesting part anyway. So, and your flaws and your mistakes are what make it unique and make it you, you know, so you got to just,
Right.
you got to keep going. Yeah.
One of the reviews of my moonlighting book says, you know, he didn't get Bruce Willis and it was a pandemic. Like, you know, he could have. And I was like, well, one
Really?
thing is I had a deadline and my book was going to come out and I was trying to get Bruce and he kept saying yes, but he kept canceling. And maybe another person would have waited, but also 24 other people gave me interviews. Why
Yeah.
should their interviews not come out? And I had a deadline. And whether
Yep.
you're Bruce Willis, he was never going to come through. If you can't come through in 2 years,
Yeah.
you're not
No.
coming through. And also, like, I can pull Bruce Willis out of my butt, but I
Yeah.
can't pull this out.
Oh, nice.
I have this framed. It's kind of, I love this so much. Talk me through how you did this.
Oh my God. Oh, I
You
love that.
remember what came through? Is it glaring? I feel like a glare is coming.
Oh yeah,
Can you
I could see it. Yeah.
Okay.
What, I mean, I don't even remember. I draw so much stuff. It's like
And I love it so much.
I think I was just trying to find a character that would suit my style because my style is very specific, and I love that character. And that I don't know why I settled on him. Was it?
You could have done anything. I said just to cover it. This was a wide open. You just said you had an idea. And when I've taken this around to try to get it in comic book shops, which 100% nobody wants the Blue Rose, but they look at it and they go, yeah, Jeff Lemire did that. How do they know that?
I have no one draws like me.
So what is it? Is it the giant's face that they know, or they know the back, or they know?
I think it's the face. Yeah, I have a real way of doing faces, and sort of my lines are really kind of angular and weird. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to art school or anything, right? So I was self-taught, and there are a lot of weird kind of mistakes in my art all the time. That would like technical mistakes that are kind of my style now. So.
I cherish that. It hangs up on my Twin Peaks wall. You know, I'm only given a few, so that could be a Sheryl Lee picture, and it's not. So
I appreciate it. I do love that too. Yeah, I mean, I love getting to draw Twin Peaks stuff. I would if I wasn't a professional, whatever, my hobby would probably be just doing Twin Peaks fan arts. It was great to be able to do that.
Well, we appreciate all your support at the Blue Rose and through all the times, the books and everything. You've been a great supporter of us, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us this time. I don't know. It was really cool that it was yours. Like, I know I have nothing to do with you, but I really felt proud of you.
Oh, thanks.
Like, 'cause, you know, like I've seen you kind of come up, and to see like a good guy make it, like that was the thing. Like somebody who deserves to make it got to make a TV show, and it was good. And I guess now you didn't have anything to do with it, so what do I care? Here I thought it was you. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, great job. I loved it. I think everyone should watch the show.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm really hopeful for season 2 and beyond, because I think some of the stuff that's in the comic, that the ongoing mythology of the world and stuff, is going to really start to work its way into the series, and I'm excited about that. So fingers crossed.
I need to get the comic from you, so let's work that out where I get a sign, because I do have my signed Royal City, which, you know, this is how we met, because you took an ad out.
I did, yeah,
for the Blue Rose for this. And now I'm going to admit that, like, when this came through, I remember saying, like, some guy wants to advertise his comic in our thing. I'm like, he's never going to sell from our thing. And then, oh, he's got a show on Netflix now. So I guess the Blue Rose did it. I don't know.
It was all you guys. It was.
I mean, I'm assuming that
I think
it was us.
Who's the guy that owns Netflix? Ted, what's his name?
And my Gideon Falls, which is my favorite one.
Oh yeah,
I think Gideon Falls is the best. No, not to pick favorites, but I actually don't have Sweet Tooth, so I need to get a signed Sweet Tooth.
I will make that. I will change that. You will.
But I'm afraid. Do I read it or do I wait? Now I'm afraid.
Well, I'm always going to recommend you read the comic.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Because now it's going to be weird because I'll know what's going to happen. Because right now,
Yeah, they've changed enough that I feel
okay.
like it'll certain things are gonna hit certain points, but there's enough change too that it'll be fresh. I feel like.
Well, thank you. I know your time is precious. I know while we were talking, you also drew another 3 comics and adapted another show and sold something to Hulu.
True.
And so at least you got that done
Yeah,
during
it
this
was
time
nice of
as
you
well.
to give me the time to work on those things.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you when
Always a
season 2
great pleasure.
comes.
Thank you.
All right. Stop recording.